The laughter started the moment Sarah Chen stepped onto the firing range at Pinnacle Tactical Academy. It wasn't the polite chuckle of nervous energy or the friendly ribbing between competitors. This was the harsh, cutting sound of mockery, the kind that cuts deep and lingers long after the echoes fade. Sarah's shooting stance, unconventional and seemingly awkward to the untrained eye, drew snickers from every corner of the elite training facility. What none of them knew was that in exactly 47 minutes, that same stance would leave them speechless as she shattered a course record that had stood untouched for 6 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Nevada sun blazed mercilessly overhead as dust devils danced across the high desert landscape surrounding Pinnacle Tactical Academy. The facility sprawled across 200 acres of unforgiving terrain, its steel and concrete structures rising from the earth like monuments to precision and discipline. This wasn't just another shooting range or weekend warrior playground. Pinnacle was where law enforcement agencies sent their most promising candidates, where military units refined their skills between deployments, and where corporate security teams learned to protect assets worth billions. The Academy's reputation was built on one simple premise: only the best survived its programs, and only the exceptional excelled. Sarah Chen had driven 12 hours straight from her small apartment in Riverside, California, her battered Honda Civic loaded with everything she owned and a dream that most people would have called impossible. At 28, she carried herself with the quiet determination of someone who had learned early that the world didn't give away anything for free. Her long black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her clothes dark jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and worn sneakers marked her immediately as an outsider in a place where tactical gear and military surplus were the unofficial uniform. The letter in her back pocket had been folded and unfolded so many times that the creases threatened to tear through the paper. It was her acceptance notification for the Advanced Tactical Shooting Championship, an annual competition that drew the finest marksmen from across the country. Winning meant more than just a trophy and recognition. The champion would receive a full scholarship to complete Pinnacle's instructor certification program, a fast track to a career that could lift Sarah out of the minimum wage jobs and dead-end prospects that had defined her life since aging out of the foster care system 10 years earlier. The registration building hummed with activity as competitors checked in for the 3-day event. Sarah found herself surrounded by individuals who looked like they had stepped out of action movies. Men and women with military bearing, expensive equipment cases, and the confident swagger of those accustomed to success. Their conversations were peppered with tactical jargon and references to training facilities she had never heard of, let alone attended. They spoke of custom rifles that cost more than she made in 6 months, of private coaching sessions with Olympic medalists, and of sponsorship deals with equipment manufacturers. Sarah approached the registration desk where a stern-faced woman in tactical clothing sat behind a laptop computer. The nameplate identified her as Rebecca Martinez, head of student services. Martinez looked up with the practiced efficiency of someone who processed hundreds of applicants but rarely found any that impressed her. Her eyes took in Sarah's appearance with barely concealed disappointment, as if she were already calculating how quickly this particular candidate would wash out. "Name," Martinez said without preamble, her fingers poised over the keyboard. "Sarah Chen," came the quiet reply. "I'm here for the Advanced Tactical Championship." Martinez's eyebrows rose slightly as she scrolled through her computer files. She found Sarah's entry and studied it for a long moment, her expression growing more skeptical with each line she read. The application listed Sarah's experience as self-taught, with no formal training credentials, no military service, and no competitive shooting background. Her listed occupation was retail associate, and her emergency contact was a social worker from the County Children's Services Department. Ms. Chun, Martinez began, her tone suggesting she was about to deliver. Disappointing news. I think there might be some confusion here. This is an advanced competition for experienced tactical shooters. Most of our participants have years of professional training and competitive experience. Are you sure you didn't mean to register for our basic safety course instead? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Sarah felt the familiar burning sensation in her chest that came whenever someone suggested she didn't belong somewhere. It was the same feeling she'd experienced in foster homes, where she was made to feel like a burden, in schools where teachers assumed she wouldn't amount to anything, and in job interviews where potential employers took one look at her background and decided she wasn't worth the risk. I'm in the right place, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion underneath. My application was accepted, and I've paid my registration fee. I'd like to check in, please. Martinez shrugged with the resignation of someone who had seen plenty of overconfident amateurs learn hard lessons. She completed the registration process with mechanical efficiency, handing Sarah a competitor's badge, a schedule of events, and a thick packet of rules and regulations. The badge felt surprisingly heavy in Sarah's palm, its weight a tangible reminder that she had earned her place here, regardless of what anyone else might think. As Sarah turned away from the registration desk, she nearly collided with a tall man in his early 30s who had been waiting behind her in line. Everything about him screamed military precision, from his pressed tactical pants to his perfectly maintained beard. His equipment case bore the logo of Blackstone Security Solutions, one of the most prestigious private military contractors in the country. The nameplate on his shirt read D. Morrison. "Excuse me," Morrison said with practiced politeness, though his eyes were already dismissing Sarah as irrelevant. "First time at Pinnacle?" "Yes," Sarah replied simply, not volunteering additional information. Morrison's smile was the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, you picked quite an event to start with. The Advanced Championship isn't exactly beginner-friendly. Most people work up to it over several years." He gestured toward his expensive equipment case. "Takes serious gear and serious training to compete at this level. What's your background?" The question was phrased casually, but Sarah recognized it for what it was: an attempt to establish hierarchy, to put her in her place before the competition even began. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She had encountered this type of person countless times throughout her life, individuals who used credentials and status as weapons to diminish others. "I shoot," she said simply, offering no elaboration. Morrison's smile widened, taking on a patronizing quality. "We all shoot, sweetheart. But this isn't a carnival game or a basic marksmanship course. These are tactical scenarios designed to test combat-level skills under extreme pressure. You might want to consider observing this year and entering something more appropriate to your experience level next time." Before Sarah could respond, Morrison had moved past her to the registration desk, already dismissing her from his thoughts. She stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of his condescension and the curious stares of other competitors who had witnessed the exchange. The message was clear. She didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. The equipment check-in area was a testament to the level of competition Sarah faced. Rows of tables displayed rifles that looked more like science fiction weapons than traditional firearms. Custom barrels, advanced optics, precision triggers, and modifications that cost more than most people's cars were the norm rather than the exception. Competitors handled their weapons with the reverence of artists caring for priceless instruments, and conversations centered around minute technical details that might as well have been spoken in a foreign language. Sarah's equipment case stood out like a sore thumb among the sleek professional gear surrounding it. The black plastic case was standard sporting goods store quality, held together with duct tape where the latches had broken and repaired multiple times. When she opened it, the contrast became even more stark. Inside lay a rifle that appeared almost primitive compared to the high-tech weapons being unpacked around her. The rifle was a Remington 700, a bolt-action hunting rifle that was nearly 15 years old. Its wooden stock showed the wear of countless hours of use, and while the metal components gleamed with careful maintenance, everything about the weapon spoke of age and modest origins. Where other competitors mounted optics that cost thousands of dollars, Sarah's rifle wore a simple 3 to 9x scope that had been purchased used from a pawn shop 3 years earlier. Her ammunition came in plain cardboard boxes rather than the custom precision rounds that others loaded from titanium cases. "Is that your actual competition rifle?" The voice belonged to a woman in her mid-20s who had approached Sarah's table with obvious curiosity. She was everything Sarah wasn't: tall, blonde, perfectly groomed, and dressed in tactical gear that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. Her nameplate identified her as Jessica Wong, though the surname seemed at odds with her appearance until Sarah noticed the wedding ring and realized it was likely a married name. "Yes," Sarah replied, continuing to assemble her rifle with practiced efficiency, despite the attention her equipment was drawing from nearby competitors. Jessica's expression was a mixture of confusion and what might have been concern. "Honey, I think there might be some mistake. This is a tactical competition, not a hunting expedition. That rifle isn't even semi-automatic, and I don't see any tactical accessories. Are you sure you're in the right event?" The genuine concern in Jessica's voice was almost worse than Morrison's outright condescension. At least Morrison's arrogance was honest in its dismissal. Jessica's worry suggested that Sarah was so obviously out of place that even strangers felt compelled to save her from embarrassment. "I'm in the right place," Sarah repeated, her voice remaining calm despite the growing attention from other competitors who had begun to notice the unusual sight of someone checking in what appeared to be a basic hunting rifle for an advanced tactical competition. Jessica glanced around at the other competitors, several of whom were now openly staring at Sarah's equipment with expressions ranging from amusement to disbelief. "Look, I don't want to see you get hurt or embarrassed. These courses are designed for tactical weapons and advanced training. Maybe you could speak to the range officers about switching to a more appropriate category." Before Sarah could respond, a new voice cut through the conversation with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "What seems to be the problem here?" The speaker was a man in his 40s with silver hair and the bearing of a career military officer. His uniform bore the Pinnacle Tactical Academy logo and identified him as Colonel James Fletcher, Director of Training Operations. Everything about Fletcher commanded respect, from his perfect posture to the way other competitors immediately created space around him when he approached. Jessica spoke up before Sarah could answer. "Colonel, I think there might be some confusion about equipment categories. This competitor appears to have brought hunting gear to a tactical competition." Fletcher's gaze shifted to Sarah's rifle, and his expression tightened slightly. He picked up the weapon with professional competence, examining it with the eye of someone who had handled thousands of firearms over his career. The rifle felt solid in his hands despite its age, and he noted the meticulous care that had gone into its maintenance. Still, the disconnect between this basic hunting rifle and the advanced tactical weapons surrounding it was impossible to ignore. "Miss Chen," Fletcher said, reading her name from the nearby registration paperwork, "I have to agree with Miss Wong here. This rifle, while well-maintained, isn't really appropriate for our tactical scenarios. Our courses are designed around semi-automatic platforms with modern accessories. You're going to be at a severe disadvantage." Sarah met Fletcher's gaze directly, her voice steady and respectful but firm. "Sir, the registration material stated that any rifle meeting basic safety requirements would be acceptable. My weapon has been inspected and certified by a licensed gunsmith. I understand I may be at a disadvantage, but I'd like the opportunity to compete." Fletcher considered this for a moment, aware that a small crowd of competitors had gathered to witness the exchange. The rules did technically allow any safe rifle, though they had been written with the assumption that serious competitors would bring appropriate equipment. Refusing to allow Sarah to compete might create legal complications, especially since she had paid her fees and met the stated requirements. "Very well," Fletcher said finally, though his tone suggested he considered this a mistake. "But I want to be clear about what you're facing. Our courses involve multiple targets, time pressure, movement between positions, and scenarios that heavily favor rapid follow-up shots. A bolt-action rifle will put you at a significant disadvantage in nearly every stage." "I understand, sir," Sarah replied. "I still want to compete." Fletcher nodded curtly and moved on, but not before Sarah caught the look he exchanged with several other officials. It was the expression of someone who expected to be proved right very soon. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah was left with the distinct impression that she had just painted a very large target on her back. The remainder of the equipment check-in process passed without incident, though Sarah remained acutely aware of the whispered conversations and sidelong glances that followed her every move. Her rifle was logged and tagged according to competition protocols, and she received her shooting schedule and lane assignments. The first stage would begin in 2 hours, giving competitors time to familiarize themselves with the range and settle into the competitive mindset. Sarah found a quiet corner of the preparation area where she could review the course descriptions and plan her approach. The Advanced Tactical Championship consisted of 5 stages, each designed to test different aspects of combat marksmanship. Stage 1 involved engaging multiple targets from a single position under time pressure. Stage 2 required movement between barricades while engaging threats at various distances. Stage 3 was a night course with limited visibility and surprise targets. Stage 4 combined physical obstacles with shooting challenges. The final stage, which had become legendary among competitive shooters, was known simply as the Gauntlet, a course that required competitors to navigate a complex scenario while engaging targets in a specific sequence, all within a time limit that eliminated most participants. As Sarah studied the course maps, she became aware of someone settling into the chair across from her. She looked up to find an elderly man in his 70s watching her with intelligent eyes. Unlike the other competitors, he wore simple civilian clothes and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. His weathered hands bore the calluses and scars of a lifetime spent working with tools, and his expression held the kind of patience that comes only with age and experience. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, though he was already seated. "Name's Robert Yamamoto. Most folks call me Bob." "Sarah Chen," she replied, grateful for what seemed to be the first genuinely friendly interaction she'd had since arriving at Pinnacle. Bob nodded toward her rifle case. "Saw the commotion earlier. Lot of folks seem interested in your equipment choices." Sarah's expression tightened slightly. "Everyone seems to think I don't belong here. Do you?" Bob asked directly, but without malice. "Belong here, I mean." The question caught Sarah off guard. She had expected either more condescension or empty reassurance, not this direct challenge delivered with genuine curiosity. "I don't know," she admitted after a moment, "but I intend to find out." Bob smiled at this answer, the expression transforming his weathered features. "Good answer. I've been coming to this competition for 8 years now. Won it twice, placed in the top 3 5 times. Know what I've learned in all that time?" Sarah shook her head, curious despite herself. "Equipment matters, but it's not everything. I've seen men with $20,000 rifles shoot like they were trying to hit the broad side of a barn from the inside. I've also seen folks with basic gear outshoot people who had every advantage in the world." He paused, studying Sarah with those intelligent eyes. "The question isn't what you're shooting. It's whether you can hit what you're aiming at when it matters." Before Sarah could respond, Bob stood to leave. "Good luck tomorrow, Sarah Chen. I have a feeling this competition is going to be more interesting than usual." As evening approached, Sarah found herself walking the perimeter of the main competition range, studying the layout and trying to visualize how the various stages would unfold. The facility was impressive in its scope and attention to detail. Every distance had been precisely measured, every angle calculated for maximum challenge. The target systems were state-of-the-art, capable of recording hit placement down to fractions of an inch and providing instant feedback to shooters and spectators alike. The main spectator area was already being prepared for tomorrow's events. Bleachers had been erected to accommodate the hundreds of law enforcement officers, military personnel, and shooting enthusiasts who would attend the competition. Television crews were setting up equipment for the live broadcast that would carry the final stages to viewers across the country. The Advanced Tactical Championship had grown into something approaching a professional sporting event, complete with commentary, sponsor booths, and prize presentations. Sarah's solitary walk was interrupted by the sound of voices from the direction of the competitors' lounge. She wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but the conversation was taking place near an open window, and the speakers were making no effort to keep their voices down. "Did you see that antique she checked in?" The voice belonged to Morrison, the Blackstone security contractor who had dismissed her earlier. "I'm honestly not sure whether to laugh or feel sorry for her. Fletcher should have turned her away." "At equipment check," replied another voice Sarah didn't recognize. "This is supposed to be a professional competition, not amateur hour. What's next? Letting people compete with muskets?" "Maybe it's some kind of publicity stunt," suggested a third voice. "Get a human interest story about the underdog who tried to compete against the professionals. Good for television ratings, even if she flames out spectacularly." "Which she will," Morrison said with certainty. "First stage involves 12 targets in 45 seconds. With a bolt-action rifle, she'd be lucky to engage half of them, let alone hit anything. It's going to be embarrassing to watch." "Should we say something?" asked the second voice. "Try to talk her out of it before she humiliates herself publicly?" "Why?" Morrison's voice carried cruel amusement. "Let her learn the lesson. Maybe next time she'll know better than to show up to a gunfight with a pea shooter." The laughter that followed was sharp and dismissive, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment. She hurried away from the window, not wanting to hear any more of their mockery. The rational part of her mind acknowledged that their assessment wasn't wrong. She was dramatically outgunned and outclassed by virtually every other competitor. The bolt-action rifle would indeed put her at a severe disadvantage in any stage requiring rapid target engagement. But Sarah had faced impossible odds before. She had survived 14 different foster homes, graduated high school despite a system that had written her off, and put herself through community college while working 2 jobs. She had learned to shoot not on fancy ranges with professional instruction, but in the mountains of Southern California, where an old rancher named Miguel Santos had taken pity on a teenage girl who reminded him of his own granddaughter. Miguel had been nothing like these tactical experts with their expensive gear and formal training. He was a weathered man in his 80s who had learned to shoot during World War II and refined his skills over decades of hunting in terrain that punished any mistake. He had taught Sarah to read wind and weather, to control her breathing and heart rate, and to make every shot count because ammunition was expensive and opportunities were rare. "Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast," Miguel had always said. "Speed without accuracy is just noise. Accuracy without speed is just target practice. But when you can be both smooth and accurate, then you can be faster than anyone expects." Under Miguel's patient guidance, Sarah had learned to shoot the Remington 700 with precision that surprised even her teacher. He had taught her unconventional techniques born of necessity rather than doctrine, methods that prioritized effectiveness over appearance. Her shooting stance looked awkward to those trained in modern tactical methods, but it was stable and repeatable under any conditions. Her bolt manipulation was fluid and economical, developed through countless hours of practice that turned conscious action into muscle memory. Most importantly, Miguel had taught her that confidence came not from equipment or credentials, but from the knowledge that she had prepared as thoroughly as possible for whatever challenges lay ahead. When the time comes to perform, he had said, trust your training and let your body do what it knows how to do. As Sarah made her way back to the small motel where she had booked a room for the competition, she found herself thinking about the conversation she had overheard. Morrison and his friends expected her to fail spectacularly, to provide entertainment through her incompetence. The thought of giving them that satisfaction burned in her chest like acid. But more than anger, Sarah felt a familiar sense of determination settling over her like armor. She had been underestimated her entire life, written off by people who took one look at her circumstances and decided she wasn't worth their consideration. Teachers who assumed she would drop out, employers who saw her background and moved on to other candidates, social workers who processed her case with bureaucratic indifference, all of them had made the same mistake. They had confused her quiet demeanor with weakness, her lack of credentials with inability, her humble origins with limited potential. They had never bothered to look beneath the surface to see the fierce intelligence and unbreakable will that had carried her through every challenge life had thrown at her. Tomorrow, Sarah knew, would be different from any challenge she had faced before. She would be competing against the best tactical shooters in the country, using equipment that put her at a severe disadvantage in front of an audience that expected her to fail. The odds were stacked against her in ways that were almost comical. But Sarah had learned long ago that odds were just numbers, and numbers could be changed by someone willing to do whatever it took to succeed. She had 47 minutes and 32 seconds from the time she stepped onto the range until the moment that would either validate every doubt that had been expressed about her or silence her critics forever. As she settled into her motel room to get what rest she could before the competition began, Sarah Chen had no idea that she was about to deliver a performance that would be replayed on shooting forums and training videos for years to come. She didn't know that her name would become legendary among competitive shooters, or that her techniques would be studied and analyzed by experts around the world. All she knew was that tomorrow morning, she would take her father's old rifle and show everyone at Pinnacle Tactical Academy exactly what they had underestimated. And in doing so, she would prove that sometimes the most dangerous competitor is the one nobody sees coming. The dawn air at Pinnacle Tactical Academy carried the sharp bite of desert cold, a reminder that Nevada nights surrendered their heat reluctantly to the climbing sun. Sarah Chen arrived at the facility 30 minutes before the mandatory safety briefing, her breath visible in small puffs as she carried her equipment case toward the competitor staging area. The parking lot was already half full with vehicles that ranged from government-issued sedans to custom trucks loaded with tactical gear worth more than most people's annual salaries. The atmosphere among the early arrivals was markedly different from the casual confidence of the previous day. Competition morning brought a focused intensity that transformed even the most cocky shooters into serious professionals. Conversations were quieter, more technical, centered around weather conditions and course strategies rather than boastful predictions. The Nevada wind had picked up overnight, creating variable conditions that would challenge even the most advanced. Equipment and training. Sarah set up her preparation area at a table near the back of the staging tent, away from the clusters of competitors who had already formed unofficial teams, based on their agency affiliations or training backgrounds. Her isolation wasn't entirely by choice, but she had learned long ago that sometimes the margins were the safest place to operate. From her position, she could observe without being observed, listen without participating in conversations that inevitably turned to equipment comparisons and credential discussions. The safety briefing was conducted by Colonel Fletcher himself, a sign of how seriously Pinnacle took both the competition and the liability concerns that came with it. Fletcher stood before the assembled competitors with the bearing of someone who had briefed soldiers before missions where mistakes carried consequences far more serious than lost trophies. His voice carried clearly across the tent as he outlined range safety protocols, emergency procedures, and the specific rules that would govern each stage of competition. "Ladies and gentlemen," Fletcher began, his tone leaving no room for misinterpretation, "you are here because you represent the finest tactical shooters in the country. The courses you will face today have been designed to test your skills under conditions that simulate real-world operational environments. Some of you will excel. Others will discover that there is always room for improvement. All of you will be challenged in ways that push your abilities to their limits." He paused, allowing his gaze to sweep across the assembled shooters. Sarah noticed that his eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than the others, though his expression remained professionally neutral. "Stage 1 begins in 15 minutes, Fletcher continued. "This course requires engagement of 12 targets at distances ranging from 25 to 100 meters. Time limit is 45 seconds. Targets will be a mix of static and reactive, requiring both precision and speed. Scoring is based on accuracy with time penalties for missed targets or overtime completion." As Fletcher continued his briefing, Sarah found herself running through mental calculations that had become second nature over years of shooting practice. 12 targets in 45 seconds meant an average of 3.75 seconds per target, but that didn't account for movement between positions or the time required to work her bolt-action rifle. With a semi-automatic weapon, 45 seconds would be generous. With her Remington 700, it would require a level of efficiency that left no margin for error. The briefing concluded with the traditional competitor's oath, a formal acknowledgement of safety protocols and sportsmanship that had become as much ritual as requirement. As the crowd began to disperse toward the range, Sarah remained seated, using the few remaining minutes to center herself mentally for the challenge ahead. She closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, a technique Miguel had taught her for managing pre-competition nerves. "Nervous?" The voice belonged to Bob Yamamoto, who had settled into the chair beside her with the quiet grace that seemed characteristic of the elderly competitor. Sarah opened her eyes and considered the question honestly. "Focused," she replied. "There's a difference." Bob nodded approvingly. "Good answer. Nerves make you tight. Focus makes you sharp." He glanced toward her rifle case, noting the meticulous way she had organized her equipment. "Mind if I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "How many rounds have you put through that rifle?" The question seemed casual, but Sarah sensed deeper meaning behind it. "Thousands," she said simply. "I've been shooting it for almost 10 years. "And how many of those were under pressure?" Sarah considered this more carefully. "Enough," she said finally. Bob smiled at her reluctance to provide specifics. "I like that you don't feel the need to oversell yourself. Half the shooters here would have told me about every competition they'd ever won and every course they'd ever taken." He stood to leave, then paused. "Want some advice from an old-timer?" Sarah nodded. "Don't try to shoot their game," Bob said quietly. "Shoot your own. They've got equipment advantages, but you've got something they don't. What's that?" "Nothing to lose," Bob replied with a knowing smile before walking away toward the range. The staging area for Stage 1 was a testament to Pinnacle's attention to detail and commitment to realistic training scenarios. The course was laid out to simulate an urban environment, complete with building facades, vehicle props, and cover positions that would be familiar to law enforcement and military personnel. Targets were positioned at various distances and angles, some partially concealed behind barriers, others placed in locations that would require shooters to expose themselves while engaging. Sarah drew lane assignment number 7, positioning her near the middle of the competitor lineup. To her left was Jessica Wong, the blonde woman who had expressed concern about Sarah's equipment the previous day. To her right was Marcus Thompson, a Detroit SWAT officer whose reputation for speed and accuracy was well known in tactical shooting circles. The proximity to such skilled competitors should have been intimidating, but Sarah found it oddly comforting. She had always performed better when surrounded by excellence rather than mediocrity. The equipment inspection for Stage 1 was conducted with military precision, each rifle and ammunition load verified against competition standards. When the range officer reached Sarah's position, he examined her Remington 700 with obvious curiosity. The bolt-action mechanism was so different from the semi-automatic rifles surrounding it that he spent extra time ensuring he understood how her system operated. "Ma'am," the officer said, his tone respectful but concerned, "I want to make sure you understand the time constraints for this stage. 45 seconds is challenging even with rapid-fire capability. With a bolt-action rifle, you'll need to be exceptionally efficient." Sarah nodded her understanding. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm ready to proceed." The officer made a note on his clipboard and moved on, but not before Sarah caught him shaking his head slightly. The message was clear. He expected her to struggle, possibly even fail to complete the course within the time limit. As competitors took their positions at the starting line, Sarah became aware of the growing crowd of spectators gathering behind the safety barriers. Word had spread through the facility about the unusual competitor with the hunting rifle, and people had come to witness what many expected to be an educational demonstration of why proper equipment mattered in tactical shooting. She could hear fragments of conversation and recognize the tone, if not always the specific words. Bets were being placed, not on whether she would succeed, but on how badly she would fail. Morrison, the Blackstone contractor, had positioned himself prominently among the spectators where his commentary could be easily heard. "This should be over quickly," he announced to anyone within earshot. "Bolt-action rifles just aren't designed for this type of engagement. She'd be lucky to get half the targets before time expires." "I heard she's completely self-taught," added another voice Sarah didn't recognize. "No formal training, no competitive background. I'm not sure what she was thinking entering this level of competition." Jessica Wong overheard these comments from her position at the starting line and turned toward Sarah with an expression of genuine sympathy. "Don't listen to them," she said quietly. "Just focus on your own performance." Sarah appreciated the gesture, even though Jessica's concern was based on the same assumptions as everyone else's mockery. The difference was one of kindness rather than accuracy. Jessica, like virtually everyone else at Pinnacle, believed that Sarah's equipment and background made failure inevitable. The only question was whether that failure would be gentle or spectacular. The range officer's voice cut through the morning air with crisp authority. "Competitors, you may load and make ready. Stage 1 will commence in 60 seconds. Sarah inserted a 5-round magazine into her rifle and worked the bolt to chamber around, the mechanical action smooth and familiar despite the dozens of eyes watching her every movement. Around her, competitors were conducting final equipment checks and mental preparation routines. Some bounced on their toes to stay loose, others closed their eyes and visualized their shooting sequence, and a few muttered quiet prayers or personal mantras. Sarah stood perfectly still, her breathing steady and controlled. She had already identified the sequence in which she would engage the targets, calculated the approximate bolt manipulation time between shots, and mentally rehearsed the movements required to transition between shooting positions. Unlike the other competitors, who would rely primarily on their optics to acquire targets quickly, Sarah would need to use her knowledge of the course layout and her ability to predict target locations. 30 seconds, announced the range officer. The desert wind had strengthened slightly, creating conditions that would affect bullet trajectory at the longer distances. Sarah noted the movement of flags positioned around the course and made mental adjustments to her aim points. Wind reading was a skill that separated competent shooters from exceptional ones, and it was an area where her years of outdoor shooting experience might actually provide an advantage over competitors who had trained primarily on controlled indoor ranges. 15 seconds, shooters ready. Sarah shouldered her rifle and settled into the shooting stance that had drawn so much mockery and criticism. To outside observers, her position looked awkward and unconventional compared to the textbook tactical stances adopted by other competitors. Her feet were positioned wider than standard doctrine suggested, her body cant more pronounced, and her rifle grip appeared almost casual. What the critics didn't understand was that Miguel had taught her to prioritize stability and consistency over appearance, to find the position that allowed her to deliver accurate shots, regardless of what it looked like to others. 10 seconds. The whispers from the spectator area had died down to almost complete silence. Even those who expected Sarah to fail were curious about how the next 45 seconds would unfold. There was something compelling about watching someone attempt what appeared to be impossible, even if the attempt was doomed to failure. 5 seconds. Stand by. Sarah's world narrowed to the immediate task ahead. She had identified her first target, a steel silhouette positioned 75 meters near the left edge of the course. Her breathing settled into the rhythm Miguel had taught her, deep and controlled, timing her shots to coincide with the natural pause between exhale and inhale. The start signal shattered the morning quiet with electronic precision, and 11 competitors exploded into motion with the fluid grace of athletes performing at the highest level of their sport. Semi-automatic rifles cracked in rapid succession as shooters engaged multiple targets with the mechanical efficiency that comes from thousands of hours of training and millions of dollars worth of equipment. Sarah's approach was fundamentally different from the controlled chaos surrounding her. Where others moved quickly between positions while firing rapidly, she took 2 deliberate steps to her left and settled into a solid shooting position before firing her first shot. The Remington 700 barked once, a deeper sound than the higher-pitched reports of the tactical rifles around her. The steel target at 75 meters rang with the distinctive tone of a solid hit, the sound carrying clearly across the range. Despite the ongoing gunfire from other lanes, Sarah worked the bolt with practiced smoothness, the spent cartridge ejecting in a perfect arc while a fresh round fed into the chamber. Her movement was economical and fluid, showing none of the rushed desperation that spectators had expected. Her second target was positioned at 50 meters, partially concealed behind a barrier that required precise shot placement to score a hit in the vital zone. Again, Sarah took the time to establish a solid position before firing, her bolt manipulation smooth and automatic. Another target rang with the sound of accurate impact. By her third shot, the pattern had become clear to those with the experience to recognize it. Sarah wasn't trying to match the rate of fire demonstrated by her competitors. Instead, she was shooting with deliberate precision, making every shot count while maintaining a pace that kept her within the time constraints. Her bolt work was faster than most observers had expected possible, and her target transitions were efficient despite the apparent awkwardness of her shooting stance. Morrison's confident commentary from the spectator area had grown noticeably quieter as Sarah continued to ring targets with metronomic precision. "She's moving too slowly," he muttered, though his voice lacked the certainty it had carried earlier. "Even if she's hitting, she never finished the course in time." But Sarah was hitting, and she was maintaining a pace that kept her competitive with shooters, using weapons designed for rapid engagement. Her fourth target fell at 90 meters, followed quickly by her fifth at 60 meters. Each shot was preceded by the same deliberate positioning, and followed by the same smooth bolt manipulation that had become as natural as breathing through years of constant practice. Jessica Wong, shooting in the lane beside Sarah, had completed her target engagement and was standing in the safe area watching the remaining competitors finish their runs. She had achieved a respectable score with her advanced rifle and tactical training, but she found herself fascinated by Sarah's unconventional approach to the same challenges. "How is she doing that?" Jessica asked Bob Yamamoto, who had moved closer to observe Sarah's performance. "She's shooting like someone who learned on a bolt gun," Bob replied, his voice carrying a note of professional admiration. "Most tactical shooters learn on semi-autos and never develop the efficiency you need with manual actions. She's working that bolt like it's part of her body." Sarah's sixth target presented a particularly challenging shot, positioned at the maximum distance of 100 meters and partially obscured by a vehicle prop. The wind had picked up further, creating conditions that would test the limits of even the most advanced equipment. Sarah took an extra moment to read the wind flags and adjust her aim point accordingly, then settled into her shooting position with the patience of someone who understood that rushing would only guarantee a miss. The shot broke cleanly, and the distant target responded with the metallic ring that confirmed another hit. Sarah was now halfway through the course with 22 seconds remaining on the timer, a pace that most observers had believed impossible. With a bolt-action rifle, the 7th through 9th targets required movement to a new shooting position, adding the challenge of transitioning between locations while maintaining awareness of the countdown timer. Sarah moved with purposeful strides, her rifle held in a ready position that would allow quick deployment once she reached her new location. Her movement was efficient rather than hurried, showing the kind of tactical awareness that comes from understanding how to balance speed with control. From her new position, Sarah engaged the 3 targets in rapid succession, her bolt manipulation becoming even faster as adrenaline sharpened her focus and muscle memory took over conscious thought. Each target rang true, bringing her total to 9 hits with 12 seconds remaining for the final 3 targets. The last shooting position required another movement, this time to a location that would allow engagement of targets positioned at close range. This was where the time pressure would be most intense, where any hesitation or fumbled manipulation would result in failure to complete the course. The spectators had grown completely silent, recognizing that they were witnessing something unexpected. Regardless of how the final seconds played out, Sarah reached her final position with 8 seconds on the timer and 3 targets remaining. The range was close enough that precise aim was less critical than speed, but her bolt-action rifle still required manual cycling between each shot. She settled into position and fired her 10th shot with 6 seconds remaining. Bolt manipulation. 5th round fired, chamber empty, magazine change required. This was the moment that would determine success or failure. Sarah had practiced magazine changes with her Remington 700,000s of times, but never under the pressure of competition with seconds remaining on a timer and hundreds of people watching. Her movements were automatic, muscle memory guiding. Her hands through the sequence of dropping the empty magazine, retrieving a fresh one from her belt, and inserting it into the rifle. 4 seconds remaining. Bolt closed on a fresh round. 11th target acquired. The rifle fired and the target rang true. 3 seconds for 1 target, well within her capabilities if nothing went wrong. Bolt manipulation, final round chambered. Last target acquired through iron sights that suddenly seemed perfectly aligned despite the pressure and time constraints. 2 seconds remaining on the timer. The final shot broke with mechanical precision, and the 12th target responded with the sound that confirmed course completion. Sarah engaged the safety and lowered her rifle just as the timer reached 0, having completed all 12 targets within the 45-second time limit that most observers had believed impossible. With her equipment, the silence that followed lasted only seconds before being broken by spontaneous applause from spectators who had come to witness a failure and instead saw something approaching the miraculous. Even competitors who had finished their own runs were applauding, recognizing skill when they saw it regardless of the equipment used to demonstrate it. Colonel Fletcher approached the scoring station with an expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts, though those who knew him well might have detected a subtle shift in his assessment of the competitor. He had expected to eliminate herself through equipment inadequacy. The electronic scoring system had recorded not only Sarah's completion time, but also the precise placement of each shot, data that would be analyzed and compared to the performances of every other competitor. Lane 7, Fletcher announced, his voice carrying clearly across the range. Sarah Chen. Course completed in 44.7 seconds. 12 targets engaged, 12 hits recorded. Score, 100 points. The announcement created a ripple of reaction that spread through the spectator area like wildfire. A perfect score on stage 1 was rare enough with advanced equipment and professional training. Achieving it with a bolt-action rifle had been considered virtually impossible by every expert at the facility. Morrison stood among the spectators with an expression of stunned disbelief, his earlier confident predictions having evaporated in the face of a performance that challenged every assumption about equipment requirements and competitive shooting. "That's not possible," he muttered, though the evidence was undeniable. "Nobody shoots a bolt gun that fast." Jessica Wong approached Sarah as she cleared her rifle and prepared to leave the firing line. "That was incredible," she said, genuine admiration replacing her earlier concern. "I've never seen anyone work a bolt action that efficiently. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Sarah shouldered her rifle and gathered her equipment with the same methodical care she had shown throughout the morning. "Practice," she said, simply offering no elaboration as she headed toward the scoring area to confirm her results. Bob Yamamoto intercepted her path with a knowing smile. "Told you to shoot your own game," he said quietly. "Looks like your game works pretty well." As Sarah walked away from stage 1, with a perfect score and the grudging respect of competitors who had begun the day dismissing her as an amateur, she was unaware that her performance had already been recorded and uploaded to social media by spectators who recognized they had witnessed something remarkable. Within hours, videos of the unknown shooter with the hunting rifle would be spreading through tactical shooting communities across the country, generating debate and analysis that would continue long after the competition ended. But for now, Sarah's focus remained entirely on the immediate future. Stage 1 had proven that her equipment and training were adequate for the challenges ahead, but 4 more stages awaited, each designed to test different aspects of tactical shooting skill. The next stage would introduce movement and multiple shooting positions, adding layers of complexity that would favor competitors with advanced equipment and formal training. As she prepared for stage 2, Sarah carried with her the knowledge that she had already exceeded every expectation and silenced the most vocal critics. More importantly, she had proven to herself that the skills Miguel had taught her in the mountains of California were as effective as any formal tactical training when applied with confidence and precision. The real test, however, was just beginning. Stage 1 had been about pure marksmanship under time pressure. The remaining stages would challenge her ability to adapt those skills to increasingly complex scenarios that would test not just her shooting ability, but her tactical thinking and physical conditioning as well. But as Sarah cleaned her rifle and prepared her equipment for the next challenge, she felt the quiet confidence that comes from having faced the unknown and emerged victorious. Whatever came next, she would meet it with the same steady determination that had carried her through every challenge life had presented. The competition was far from over, but Sarah Chen was no longer the amateur outsider that everyone had expected to fail. She was a legitimate contender who had earned her place among the finest tactical shooters in the country, and she intended to prove that her success in stage 1 was no accident. The morning sun climbed higher into the Nevada sky, burning away the last of the dawn chill and promising another day of desert heat. But in the preparation area at Pinnacle Tactical Academy, The temperature seemed to have dropped several degrees as competitors and spectators alike reassessed everything they thought they knew about equipment, training, and the woman with the hunting rifle who had just rewritten the rules of engagement. The preparation area between stages buzzed with an energy that was markedly different from the morning's casual dismissiveness. Competitors who had barely acknowledged Sarah's presence now found reasons to walk past her equipment table, stealing glances at the bolt-action rifle that had just delivered a performance none of them had thought possible. The conversations were quieter, more speculative, and peppered with technical discussions about how someone could manipulate a manual action with such efficiency. Sarah methodically cleaned her rifle while stage officials prepared the course for the second challenge. Her movements remained deliberate and unhurried, showing no outward sign that she was aware of the attention focused on her. Years of living on the margins had taught her to recognize when she had become the center of speculation, but she had also learned that acknowledging such attention rarely improved her situation. The scoring summary from Stage 1 had been posted prominently near the registration tent, and small crowds gathered around it throughout the break between competitions. Sarah's perfect score placed her in a tie for first place with 3 other competitors, all of whom were using equipment worth 10 times what she had paid for her entire kit. The mathematical impossibility of what she had accomplished was lost on no one who understood the mechanical limitations of bolt-action rifles in rapid engagement scenarios. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Pinnacle's chief instructor and a former Olympic shooter, approached Sarah's preparation area with the measured stride of someone accustomed to analyzing performance under pressure. Rodriguez had witnessed thousands of shooters over her career, from raw beginners to world champions, and she possessed the kind of technical expertise that could identify subtle details others missed. "Ms. Chen," Rodriguez said, settling into a folding chair without invitation, "I hope you don't mind if I satisfy some professional curiosity." Sarah looked up from her cleaning routine, noting the woman's calm demeanor and intelligent eyes. Unlike the dismissive authority figures she had encountered so far, Rodriguez carried herself with the confidence of someone who had earned her position through demonstrated competence rather than institutional politics. "I don't mind," Sarah replied, continuing her methodical maintenance of the rifle's bolt assembly. Rodriguez watched the cleaning process with professional interest, noting the practiced efficiency of Sarah's movements and the intimate familiarity she displayed with her weapons mechanisms. "That bolt manipulation technique you demonstrated in Stage 1 isn't taught in any tactical curriculum I'm familiar with. The economy of motion suggests extensive training, but your application paperwork indicates you're self-taught." "I had good instruction," Sarah said simply, not volunteering additional details. "May I ask who taught you to shoot?" Sarah considered the question carefully. Miguel Santos had been many things during his long life, but he had never sought recognition or credentials from the shooting community. His expertise had been born of necessity and refined through decades of practical application rather than formal study. "A rancher in California," she said finally. "He learned during the war and taught me what he knew." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. Combat veterans often develop techniques that prioritize effectiveness over appearance. What you demonstrated out there was pure efficiency, stripped of unnecessary motion. She paused, watching Sarah reassemble her bolt with mechanical precision. "Stage 2 will be different. Multiple shooting positions, movement under time pressure, targets at varying distances and elevations. How do you plan to adapt your techniques?" The question was posed without condescension or hidden agenda, simply one professional seeking to understand another's approach to a shared challenge. Sarah appreciated the directness and responded in kind. "Same way I approached Stage 1, she said. "Identify the most efficient path through the course and execute it without wasting motion or ammunition." Rodriguez smiled at this answer, recognizing the mindset of a serious competitor who understood that tactics mattered as much as marksmanship in complex scenarios. The course designers have introduced some interesting challenges this year. Variable lighting, unstable shooting platforms, targets that require precise shot placement to score. Your equipment disadvantage will be more pronounced. It usually is, Sarah replied, matter-of-factly. Before Rodriguez could respond, the public address system crackled to life with Colonel Fletcher's voice announcing the preparation phase for Stage 2. Competitors were called to review the course layout and receive their specific briefings on safety protocols and scoring criteria. Stage 2 represented a significant escalation in complexity from the opening challenge. The course was designed to simulate a multi-story engagement scenario, with shooting positions elevated on platforms of varying heights and stability. Competitors would navigate between 5 different firing points, engaging targets that ranged from close-quarter battle distances to precision shots extending beyond 200 meters. The course layout resembled an urban warfare training facility, complete with building facades, stairways, and elevated platforms that would test competitors' ability to maintain accuracy while dealing with awkward shooting angles and unstable positions. Some platforms were deliberately constructed with minimal support, requiring shooters to manage their movement carefully to avoid disrupting their shooting position. Sarah studied the course diagram with the focused attention of someone calculating angles and distances. Unlike Stage 1, which had allowed her to use optimal shooting positions, this challenge would require adaptation to whatever support was available at each firing point. Her unconventional stance might actually prove advantageous on unstable platforms where traditional techniques could be disrupted by movement or inadequate support. The target array was equally challenging, featuring a mix of steel silhouettes, paper targets with specific scoring zones, and reactive targets that required precise hit placement to activate. Some targets were positioned behind partial cover, demanding accuracy that would challenge even the most advanced optics systems. Others were placed at distances that would test the limits of both equipment and shooter capability. Morrison had positioned himself prominently among the spectators gathered around the course briefing area, his confidence somewhat restored after having time to process Sarah's unexpected performance. "This is where reality sets in," he announced. To anyone within earshot, Stage 1 was impressive, but this course requires rapid target transitions and shooting from awkward positions. A bolt gun just can't keep up with that kind of demand. His commentary attracted nods of agreement from several other competitors who had been shaken by Sarah's perfect score but remained convinced that her equipment limitations would become insurmountable as the challenges increased. The consensus among the tactical shooting community held that bolt-action rifles were fundamentally unsuited to dynamic scenarios requiring speed and adaptability. Jessica Wong overheard Morrison's assessment and found herself torn between loyalty to conventional wisdom and the evidence she had witnessed during Stage 1. Her own performance had been solid but unremarkable, the kind of competent showing that reflected good training, adequate equipment, without approaching excellence. Sarah's perfect score had forced her to question assumptions about the relationship between equipment and performance that had guided her entire approach to competitive shooting. "Maybe she just got lucky," suggested Marcus Thompson, the Detroit SWAT officer whose lane assignment had given him a close view of Sarah's Stage 1 performance. 11 perfect shots with a bolt gun is impressive, but it could have been a statistical anomaly. This stage will separate the real shooters from the flukes. Thompson's assessment carried weight among the assembled competitors, many of whom were familiar with his reputation and accomplishments in tactical shooting circles. His suggestion that Sarah's performance might have been an outlier provided psychological comfort to those who preferred explanations that aligned with their existing beliefs about equipment requirements. Bob Yamamoto listened to these discussions with the patient amusement of someone who had seen confident predictions proven wrong many times over his long shooting career. He approached Sarah as she completed her course study and prepared for the equipment inspection that would precede Stage 2. "They're still trying to explain away what you did," he said quietly, gesturing toward the cluster of competitors engaged in animated discussion near the briefing area. Sarah shouldered her rifle case and gathered her gear with practiced efficiency. "Let them talk," she said. "I've got work to do." The equipment inspection for Stage 2 was conducted with even greater attention to detail than the previous stage, reflecting both the increased complexity of the course and the heightened interest in Sarah's unusual rifle. The range officer who examined her Remington 700 was clearly fascinated by the mechanical differences between her bolt-action system and the semi-automatic rifles that dominated tactical shooting. "Ma'am," the officer said as he completed his inspection, "I want to make sure you understand the challenges you'll face on this course. Some of the shooting positions are quite unstable, and the target sequences require rapid transitions that heavily favor semi-automatic platforms." Sarah accepted her equipment back with a nod of acknowledgement. "I understand the challenges, officer. I'm ready to proceed." The range officer made his notation and moved on, but his expression suggested he expected to witness a much different outcome than Stage 1 had provided. The prevailing wisdom among range staff held that equipment limitations would become increasingly apparent as courses grew more demanding. Lane assignments for Stage 2 placed Sarah in position 12, near the end of the competitor lineup. This positioning would allow her to observe most of the other shooters' approaches before attempting the course herself, providing valuable intelligence about optimal shooting positions and target engagement sequences. The disadvantage was psychological, pressure that built while waiting for her turn. But Sarah had learned to use observation time constructively rather than allowing anxiety to accumulate. The first competitor to attempt Stage 2 was a federal agent whose impressive equipment and crisp technique set a high standard for those who would follow. His performance was textbook tactical shooting, demonstrating the kind of smooth transitions and rapid target engagement that came from hundreds of hours of professional training. He completed the course in 2 minutes and 18 seconds with a score of 94 points, establishing a benchmark that would prove difficult to exceed. Subsequent competitors delivered performances that clustered around similar time and accuracy metrics, reinforcing the impression that Stage 2 would separate serious tactical shooters from those with inadequate preparation or equipment. The course's combination of movement, unstable shooting positions, and challenging target arrays was proving as demanding as the designers had intended. Morrison's attempt was particularly impressive, showcasing the kind of aggressive movement and rapid engagement techniques that had made him successful in private military contracting. His time of 2 minutes and 6 seconds with a score of 96 points represented the kind of performance that typically won tactical shooting competitions. As he cleared the course and returned to the staging area, his confidence had clearly been restored by a demonstration of superiority that aligned with his expectations about equipment and training. "That's how it's done," Morrison announced to the gathered spectators, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had proven a point about the importance of proper gear and professional instruction. Speed and accuracy require the right tools for the job. Jessica Wong's performance reflected solid fundamentals and careful course management, though her time of 2 minutes and 29 seconds placed her among the middle tier of competitors. She had approached the course conservatively, prioritizing accuracy over speed in a strategic decision that reflected her understanding of her own capabilities and limitations. Marcus Thompson delivered a characteristically aggressive performance that showcased his law enforcement background, completing the course in 2 minutes and 12 seconds with a score of 95 points. His technique emphasized rapid movement between positions and efficient target engagement, demonstrating the kind of tactical awareness that came from operational experience rather than pure range time. As Sarah's turn approached, the spectator area had grown significantly as word spread through the facility about the unusual competitor, who had achieved a perfect score in Stage 1. Pinnacle staff members who had no official duties related to the competition found reasons to position themselves where they could observe Stage 2, creating an audience that far exceeded normal levels for individual competitor runs. Dr. Rodriguez had stationed herself in a location that provided optimal viewing angles for analyzing shooting technique, her professional curiosity evident as she prepared to document whatever approach Sarah would take to the complex course ahead. Her years of experience coaching Olympic-level shooters had taught her to recognize innovation when she encountered it, and Sarah's Stage 1 performance had displayed elements that challenged conventional teaching about rifle manipulation and shooting positions. Colonel Fletcher occupied his customary position near the timing station, though his attention was focused more intently than usual on the competitor preparing to attempt Stage 2. His initial assessment of Sarah as an amateur who would quickly eliminate herself had been challenged by her perfect score, forcing him to reconsider assumptions about the relationship between equipment sophistication and competitive performance. Sarah approached the starting position with her rifle slung across her back and her shooting kit organized for efficient access during movement between positions. Her preparation routine was minimal compared to the elaborate rituals some competitors employed, consisting mainly of a few deep breaths and a final check of her equipment security. The course timer began its countdown as Sarah settled into position. At the first firing point, an elevated platform approximately 8 feet above ground level. The platform's construction was deliberately minimal, providing just enough support for a shooting position while introducing movement and instability that would challenge traditional techniques. 3 targets were visible from the first position, positioned at distances of 75, 100, and 120 meters respectively. The engagement sequence was left to competitor discretion, though the logical approach would be to engage targets from nearest to farthest, to minimize the effects of any accuracy degradation that might occur as the course progressed. The start signal activated, and Sarah immediately demonstrated that her Stage 1 performance had been no accident. Her movement to the first shooting position was economical and purposeful, showing none of the hurried desperation that often characterized competitors attempting to manage time pressure. She settled into her unconventional stance with a fluidity that suggested the platform's instability was simply another variable to be managed rather than a significant obstacle. Her first shot engaged the 75-meter target with mechanical precision, the Remington 700's report echoing across the range as the steel target responded with the distinctive ring of a solid hit. Her bolt manipulation was smooth and automatic, requiring no conscious thought as muscle memory guided her hands through the familiar sequence of extraction, ejection, and reloading. The second target fell to another precisely placed shot, followed immediately by the third, as Sarah demonstrated the kind of shooting rhythm that transformed individual actions into a seamless flow of movement and marksmanship. Her transition to the second firing position was accomplished with surprising speed, her rifle remaining ready for immediate deployment as she navigated the course's stairway system. The second position presented a more challenging array of targets, including 2 steel silhouettes positioned behind partial cover that required precise shot placement to score hits in the vital zones. Sarah's approach to these targets was methodical rather than rushed, taking the time necessary to ensure accurate shot placement while maintaining awareness of the countdown timer that would determine her overall performance. From the spectator area, the reactions to Sarah's performance were markedly different from the skeptical amusement that had characterized the morning's commentary. Morrison watched with growing frustration as Sarah continued to demonstrate technique that challenged his fundamental assumptions about equipment requirements. His earlier confident predictions about bolt action limitations were being systematically disproven by a performance that emphasized efficiency over raw speed. "She's moving too deliberately," he muttered, though his voice lacked the certainty it had carried earlier. She never maintained that pace through the entire course. But Sarah was maintaining her pace, and her deliberate approach was proving more effective than the hurried movement that characterized many tactical shooting performances. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, and her bolt manipulation had achieved a rhythm that approached the rapid-fire capability of semi-automatic systems. Her unconventional stance was providing the stability necessary to maintain accuracy despite the course's challenging shooting positions. The third firing position required shots at extended range, with targets positioned at distances approaching the limits of her equipment's effective capability. This was where the advantages of advanced optics and precision ammunition were expected to become decisive, separating competitors with professional-grade equipment from those attempting to compete with basic hunting rifles. Sarah approached these long-range targets with the same methodical precision she had applied throughout the course, taking the additional time necessary to read wind conditions and calculate the holdover required for accurate impact at extended distance. Her shots were spaced slightly further apart as she allowed for the additional aiming time required, but each impact was confirmed by the metallic response of steel targets struck in their center zones. Dr. Rodriguez observed Sarah's long-range technique with professional fascination, noting elements that contradicted standard teaching about precision shooting. Sarah's body position and rifle hold showed adaptations that had clearly been developed through extensive practice rather than formal instruction, yet the results were speaking for themselves in the form of consistently accurate impacts. The fourth position presented the course's most challenging shooting scenario, requiring engagement of targets from a deliberately unstable platform that would test competitors' ability to maintain accuracy while managing significant movement and vibration. Most shooters approach this challenge by attempting to time their shots to coincide with momentary stability, accepting some accuracy degradation in exchange for maintaining their pace through the course. Sarah's approach was characteristically unconventional. Rather than fighting the platform's instability, she seemed to incorporate it into her shooting technique, using her body position to dampen movement, while maintaining the flexibility necessary to track targets through their engagement windows. Her shots were timed to coincide with the platform's natural rhythm, demonstrating an adaptability that suggested years of shooting under less than ideal conditions. The final position required the most rapid target engagement of the entire course. With multiple steel targets positioned at close range and configured to test the limits of even semi-automatic rifle capability. This was where Sarah's bolt-action system would face its greatest challenge, requiring her to cycle her action with maximum efficiency while maintaining accuracy under severe time pressure. Sarah reached the final position with 38 seconds. Remaining on the course timer and 7 targets still to be engaged. The mathematics were daunting, even for competitors with rapid-fire capability, requiring an average of slightly more than 5 seconds per target, including movement and target acquisition time. What followed was a display of bolt manipulation that redefined spectators' understanding of what was possible with manual action systems. Sarah's rifle became an extension of her body, the bolt cycling with machine-like precision as she engaged target after target with devastating accuracy. Her breathing controlled the rhythm of her shooting, each shot timed to coincide with her natural respiratory pause, while her hands performed the mechanical actions required to maintain fire. The final target fell with 8 seconds remaining on the timer, and Sarah engaged her safety while maintaining her shooting position until the electronic buzzer confirmed course completion. She had navigated Stage 2's complex challenges with a combination of precision and efficiency that left spectators struggling to process what they had witnessed. The silence that followed her course completion lasted significantly longer than after Stage 1, reflecting the deeper challenge to conventional assumptions that her performance represented. Stage 2 had been designed specifically to expose the limitations of basic equipment and amateur training, yet Sarah had not only completed it successfully, but had done so with a time and accuracy combination that placed her among the day's top performers. Colonel Fletcher approached the scoring station with an expression that revealed the internal conflict between his professional skepticism and the undeniable evidence of superior performance. The electronic scoring system had recorded not only Sarah's completion time, but also the precise impact location of each shot, data that would be analyzed and debated by tactical shooting experts for months to come. "Lane 12, Fletcher announced, his voice carrying a note of professional respect that had been absent from his earlier interactions with Sarah. Sarah Chen, course completed in 2 minutes and 4 seconds. 15 targets engaged, 15 hits recorded. Score, 98 points. The announcement triggered a response from the spectator area that went beyond polite applause to something approaching amazement. Sarah had not only matched the performance of competitors with far superior equipment, she had exceeded most of them while using a rifle that conventional wisdom held to be completely unsuitable for tactical shooting competitions. Morrison stood among the spectators with an expression that cycled between disbelief and professional reassessment. His own impressive performance had been overshadowed by a demonstration that challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between equipment sophistication and competitive success. The confident predictions he had made about bolt-action limitations were being systematically disproven by results that could not be explained away as statistical anomalies. Sarah cleared her rifle and gathered her equipment with the same methodical efficiency she had displayed throughout the competition, showing no outward reaction to the attention and speculation her performance had generated. As she walked toward the preparation area for the next stage, conversations followed in her wake as competitors and spectators attempted to process what they had witnessed and reconcile it with their existing understanding of tactical shooting principles. Bob Yamamoto intercepted her path with a knowing smile that reflected his satisfaction at having recognized exceptional ability where others had seen only amateur inadequacy. 2 for 2, he said quietly. Still want to stick with your original assessment about having nothing to lose? Sarah shouldered her rifle case and considered the question with the same deliberate thoughtfulness she brought to every challenge. 3 stages left, she replied simply. We'll see how it goes. As Stage 2 concluded and preparations began for the afternoon challenges, the competitive landscape at Pinnacle Tactical Academy had been fundamentally altered. Sarah Chen was no longer the amateur outsider that everyone expected to fail spectacularly. She had established herself as a legitimate contender, whose unconventional approach and basic equipment had proven capable of matching or exceeding the performance of the most advanced systems available. The real test, however, lay ahead in stages, designed to push competitors to their absolute limits through challenges that would test not just marksmanship and equipment, but mental resilience, physical conditioning, and the kind of tactical thinking that separated competent shooters from true champions. But as Sarah prepared for whatever came next, she carried with her the quiet confidence that comes from having faced the unknown twice and emerged victorious both times. Her father's old rifle had proven itself capable of competing at the highest levels, and she had demonstrated that skill and determination could overcome significant equipment disadvantages when applied with intelligence and precision. The afternoon would bring new challenges, but Sarah Chen was ready to meet them with the same steady resolve that had already exceeded every expectation and silenced the most vocal critics. Whatever Stage 3 might demand, she would face it. As she had everything else in her life, with careful preparation, unwavering focus, and the unshakable belief that success was possible for those willing to work for it. The legendary gauntlet course at Pinnacle Tactical Academy stretched before the remaining competitors like a death sentence written in steel and concrete. After 3 grueling stages, only 8 shooters remained qualified for the final challenge that had broken careers and humbled champions. The course record of 8.2 seconds had stood untouched for 6 years, set by a Navy SEAL whose name was whispered with reverence in tactical shooting circles. Sarah Chen stood at the starting line, her ancient Remington 700 looking absurdly primitive among the high-tech arsenal surrounding her. The desert sun had reached its merciless peak, turning the range into a furnace that tested endurance as much as skill. Sweat beaded on foreheads despite the dry heat, and nervous energy crackled through the assembled crowd like electricity before a storm. The gauntlet was deceptively simple in concept. Navigate an obstacle course while engaging 6 targets in precise sequence, all within a time limit that eliminated 90% of attempts. What made it legendary was the execution. The course required sprinting between positions, sliding under barriers, vaulting over walls, and maintaining lethal accuracy while your heart rate spiked beyond sustainable levels. Morrison had attempted the course first, his expensive gear and professional training, delivering a respectable time of 12.7 seconds. His performance drew appreciative nods from the crowd, though everyone knew it was nowhere near record territory. The next 3 competitors fell victim to missed targets or overtime penalties, their dreams dying in the unforgiving mathematics of elite competition. Dr. Rodriguez positioned herself where she could analyze every movement Sarah would make. Her scientific mind was fascinated by the contradictions this unknown shooter represented, the way primitive equipment was producing results that challenged decades of tactical doctrine. She had already filled 2 notebooks with observations that would fuel research papers for years to come. Colonel Fletcher called Sarah to the starting position, with newfound respect evident in his tone. 3 perfect stages had transformed his assessment from skeptical authority figure to professional admirer. He had witnessed thousands of shooters over his career, but none had redefined his understanding of what was possible quite like the quiet woman with the hunting rifle. Final competitor, Fletcher announced to the hushed crowd. Sarah Chen attempts the gauntlet. Sarah settled into her stance, and for the first time all day, she smiled. The expression transformed her face completely, replacing the focused intensity with something that looked almost predatory. This was the moment she had been preparing for since she first learned that smooth was fast and fast was deadly. The course stretched ahead like a puzzle she had already solved. 6 targets at varying distances and angles, each requiring perfect shot placement while maintaining movement that would test the limits of human coordination. Her Remington would need to perform like a precision instrument while she pushed her body beyond its normal capabilities. The starting buzzer shattered the desert silence. Sarah exploded forward with speed that caught everyone off guard. Her first movement was a sprint to the 30-meter line where she dropped into a shooting position that looked nothing like textbook form but provided rock-solid stability. Her rifle came up as naturally as breathing, and the first target rang. True before most spectators had processed that the run had begun. She was moving again before the brass hit the ground, her bolt manipulation so fluid it seemed like magic. The second position required a combat roll under a low barrier, a maneuver that should have disrupted any shooting stance. Instead, Sarah flowed through the movement like water, emerging on the other side with her rifle already tracking toward the second target. The crowd was dead silent now, recognizing they were witnessing something beyond ordinary competition. Sarah's movement was poetry written in violence, each action flowing seamlessly into the next without wasted motion or hesitation. Her breathing controlled everything, timing each shot to coincide with her natural rhythm while her body performed feats that seemed to defy physics. Target 3 fell at 50 meters while she was still moving, the shot taken during a transition that should have made accuracy impossible. Her bolt worked with mechanical precision, ejecting spent brass in perfect arcs while chambering fresh rounds with the reliability of a machine designed for this single purpose. Morrison stood among the spectators with his mouth hanging open, his professional skepticism crumbling under the weight of what he was witnessing. This wasn't just good shooting or even great shooting. This was something approaching the supernatural. A display of human capability that redefined what he thought possible. The fourth target required a vault over a 4-foot wall, followed immediately by a precision shot at 75 meters. Sarah hit the obstacle at full speed, her hands planted on the barrier as she flowed over it with gymnastic grace. She landed in a shooting position that looked unstable but proved devastatingly effective as the fourth target responded to her. Shot with metallic finality, Dr. Rodriguez was furiously scribbling notes, her scientific training warring with the evidence of her eyes. The biomechanics alone should have made this performance impossible, yet Sarah was rewriting textbooks with every movement. Her shooting stance remained consistent despite obstacles that should have forced constant adaptation, suggesting a level of body awareness that bordered on the mystical. Targets 5 and 6 represented the course's final test, positioned to require maximum precision while competitors were operating at their physical limits. Heart rates approaching 200 beats per minute, oxygen debt accumulating. Fine. Motor control degrading with each passing second. This was where champions were separated from mere competitors, where perfect technique met ultimate pressure. Sarah approached the final shooting position with 6.8 seconds elapsed, well ahead of record pace but still requiring perfection in the final movements. The fifth target fell to a shot that seemed impossible, taken while she was still. Settling into position but finding center mass with surgical precision, one target remained. One shot to either join the legends or become another cautionary tale about reaching beyond your capabilities. Sarah's bolt cycled one final time, the mechanical action as smooth as it had been for the first shot of the day. Her breathing steadied into the rhythm Miguel had taught her all those years ago in the California mountains. The final shot broke with crystalline clarity, and the sixth target rang true just as the timer reached 7.9 seconds. The silence that followed lasted an eternity compressed into heartbeats. 7.9 seconds. A new course record that shattered the previous mark by 0.3 of a second. An improvement that represented years of advancement compressed into a single perfect run. Then the crowd erupted. Competitors, spectators, range officials, everyone who had witnessed the impossible burst into applause that seemed to shake the desert itself. Sarah had not just won the competition, she had redefined what winning meant, rewritten the rules about equipment and training and the limits of human performance. Morrison pushed through the crowd toward Sarah, his earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching reverence. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "I've never seen anything like that." Sarah accepted his handshake with quiet dignity. "Equipment doesn't shoot," she said. "People do." Colonel Fletcher approached with the championship trophy, his expression mixing professional admiration with personal amazement. "Ms. Chen, in 30 years of competitive shooting, I have never witnessed a performance that so completely challenged conventional wisdom while achieving such extraordinary results." Bob Yamamoto appeared at Sarah's elbow with a smile that suggested he had known this outcome was inevitable. "Told you to shoot your own game," he said quietly. "Looks like your game is better than anyone else's." As Sarah accepted the trophy and the scholarship that would transform her life, she thought about Miguel Santos and the lessons he had taught in the mountains of California. He had been right about so many things, but most importantly about the truth that skill mattered more than equipment, preparation more than credentials, and determination more than any advantage money could buy. The desert sun began its descent toward the western mountains as photographers captured images that would appear in shooting magazines for decades to come. Sarah Chen had arrived at Pinnacle Tactical Academy as an unknown amateur with hunting equipment and impossible dreams. She was leaving as a legend whose name would be spoken alongside the greatest tactical shooters in history. But perhaps most importantly, she had proven that sometimes the most dangerous competitor is the one nobody sees coming. The quiet person in the corner with ancient equipment and unshakable resolve. She had shown that champions aren't made in classrooms or purchased with expensive gear, but forged in the crucible of determination and perfected through thousands of hours of deliberate practice. The mocking laughter that had greeted her unconventional stance 12 hours earlier had been replaced by respectful silence and genuine admiration. Sarah Chen had not just won a competition. She had revolutionized an entire sport and inspired a generation of shooters to question everything they thought they knew about the relationship between equipment and excellence. As she drove away from Pinnacle Tactical Academy, with her father's rifle secured in the passenger seat and a scholarship that would change her life forever, Sarah carried with her the quiet satisfaction that comes from proving doubters wrong, while honoring the memory of a teacher who had believed in her when no one else would. The legend of the unknown shooter who cleared the gauntlet in 7.9 seconds would grow with each retelling, but the woman who lived it remained unchanged. Sarah Chen was still the same person who had arrived that morning with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The only difference was that now she had both. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.